Okay, welcome into the Family Section podcast. Tony Massarotti here with Greg Bottenhorn, who is the Chief Marketing Officer of Jassby. And the big question many of you may have is, who are we and what are we doing here? So let's start with that. And Greg, why don't you take that away and explain what our goal is here?
Yeah, sure. So I'm an executive. I'm a father of four, but really, I often say I'm a walking anomaly, right? So I'm a total pain in the butt, but I'm caring. I'm laid back, but a bit of a control freak. I'm creative and I'm analytical. I'm a deep thinker who lives for today, which is kind of weird. I'm an extroverted introvert, which is what I always say. I'm a bit of a slob, but I love things clean. I like a good fart joke as much as a deep conversation about pretty much anything. I always think I have something brilliant to say, but probably rarely do, which, Maz, I think is a requirement for this industry, isn't it?
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, you have to sound a lot smarter than you are, or you have to
Yeah,
think, you
yeah.
have to sound like you think you're smart.
Yeah, exactly. And I would say really what we're here for is all things family, right? So Maz and I are both parents. We're both professionals who have busy lives. We know what all plays into that in terms of how it plays in with raising kids, relationships, family finances, even things like family meals and family activities and things like that. But family is always a hot topic. So it's something fun to talk about. There's never a lack of things to discuss or a lack of opinions on things like parenting. So, we'll have some awesome guests that come in and share their insights and thoughts on certain topics. But I just want to make sure that we're covering all things family here.
Well, so, Greg and I met, for the listeners, Greg and I met through Jassby, who is an advertiser at 98.5. And people always say, oh, do you really use the product? And those are the questions I get. But one of the things I like to say is, when we get to know people, one of the things that more often than not, if you have a family, one of the first things you talk about is parenting. Oh, do you have kids? Because it's something that people can relate to. We all face the same challenges and struggles, particularly in this day and age. And so, it really is an opportunity for people to bond over things that in which they share an interest, because everybody has an interest in their kids. So that was the idea here. And kids are certainly a big part of it, but also, just family life in general. And the family section made sense because we are a sports station. And so, I give credit to Greg and Stephanie, who also works at Jassby, one of our producers, who came up with the name. And that's what the idea is. So, we like to think that you can be both. You can be a sports fan, you can be a family guy, you can be serious about your job, you can be lots of things. Greg, I've always marveled that people say, well, what kind of guy is he? And I would say, most people are the same. We're lots of things. It just depends on when you catch us and what the circumstance is. So you put me in a comfortable environment to me and I'm confident. You put me in an environment that's uncomfortable and I'm not confident.
Yeah, absolutely.
And to me, that's one of the, we all have those moments and places.
And Maz, isn't that the kind of the same thing with parenting too? It's funny. Like we all strive to be these great parents, but you can always name off some times where you could have done something better or differently. Or I know I struggle with that all the time, right? Like I make a parenting decision, and I'm like, yeah, it's probably not the best parenting decision to make. So I think it's very similar there.
Oh, look, and again, like they say at the beginning, when you get married and then have kids, or maybe not necessarily in that order, and some people choose not to get married at all. With children in particular, there's no manual, there's no experience required. In fact, it's impossible to get experience until you have one. And so, we all kind of just fly by the seat of our pants, and our only frame of reference really is what it was like when we were parented. But the problem is the world is a really different place now. So I have two kids. For those of you who don't know, I have two boys, a junior in high school and a freshman in high school. And my wife handles the bulk of the day-to-day operation as it is, because I'm working a good chunk of the time. So she's got the more important job in the house, as I like to say, Greg. And I don't know what your setup is in terms of whether you and your wife both work or not.
Yeah, no, it's really just me. Although I think she would probably say a little bit differently. She does sell some real estate and things like that. But I think that the thing that parents always say, right, is being a mom's a full-time job, isn't it?
Oh gosh, it's the
Yeah.
most important full-time job, and the most what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, it's thankless. I mean, let's face it, kids can be self-absorbed by definition. It's not a criticism; it's a statement of fact, and so it's it can be a thankless job. But look, I know we have a lot of things we want to get to here, and there's a lot of ground to cover. So, Greg, I know you have an interesting theory as it comes to communication with kids, right?
Yeah.
And
So
go
yeah,
ahead.
look, I mean, look, one of the hard parts is that, and you kind of mentioned this, Tony, right? Our parenting model is what we grew up with for our parents, and the challenges, and we go through the same thing now as parents that our parents went through when we were kids, and things are different, and so, one of the things I always say is that you've got to engage with your kids where they're engaged. Right. And so for me, that's key. And so when I was a kid, what that meant was that we'd sit around and, at the dinner table, or after dinner, we'd play a game or do something like that. But I mean, honestly, we had a TV with an antenna on it. We got 3 channels. Like you didn't have a whole lot of options at that point. And
Correct.
things have changed. Technology's changed. There's a lot more options available, and kids aren't engaged that way anymore. So if we as parents want to engage with our kids, we've got to engage with them where they're already engaged.
So, what kinds of things do you do to engage with them?
So I like to play games with my kids, and when I say that, I don't mean board games, right? I mean this day and age, it's mobile games. It's hopping on the PlayStation with my son. I do a lot of FaceTime with my daughter. So I've just to take a step back. I've got 4 kids. 2 of them are adults, and then 2 of them are in high school still. When I say adults, one of them's still in college. But I'll do things, and honestly, technology makes this stuff really easy. So my daughter and I like to watch certain TV shows together. So when she's at college on a Friday night, we'll pop up one of the many sharing apps that there are, and we'll watch a TV show together while she's at college and I'm at home. So, I can tell you, we took a family road trip a few years ago, and it was, I mean, crazy stuff. 10,000 miles, 6 weeks, hours a day in the car. And we got into this mobile game. I think it was called like Flappy Bird or something. I don't know, but you didn't need Wi-Fi for it. And you could all kind of connect to each other's mobile devices. And we played it as a family, like all day, every day. Basic, boring game, little bubble that bounces around. But that was how we engage. It's engage with them on their phones, engage with them in apps. I know a lot of parents today engage with their kids on social media. I'm not a huge social media user myself, but I know a lot of parents are engaging with their kids that way via Snapchat and Instagram and Facebook and all that fun stuff. I don't think the kids are using Facebook anymore, Tony, are they?
Well, so that, honestly, that I'm the wrong person to ask. What I can tell you is I focus on what they do use, at least
Yeah.
as it pertains to me, right? So, and I do a similar kind of thing. So, for example, just as a quick story, I send my son texts all the time, and he doesn't answer them. And my wife says to me, "Well, you can't talk to him on text. You got to talk to him on Snapchat. If you send to him on Snapchat, he'll answer." And sure enough, he answers me on Snapchat. So it's like he doesn't even check the app. And I know there are a lot of parents out there that frown on the phone use. And, look, we're used to something different, right? As you were saying. But the fact is that they're in a world where these things are their lives. And so when we're not around them, they're using them anyway. And which brings me to a question I want to ask you actually as we go on here, which is when did your kids start using mobile devices? But I want to hold on to that for 1 second.
Okay.
So, the bottom line is you can either really fight it and, and hide the phone somewhere, literally prevent them from phone use, or as you said, you can engage with them on their platform and get them to communicate, particularly with boys, because it's a challenge. I mean,
Oh
you
my
get the
gosh.
one-word answers. I
Forget
said to
about
my son yesterday, "How'd your day go?" He said, "Fine."
it. Yeah.
Oh, all right, great. Thanks. So there wasn't a lot coming back, but I did find that, you said engage with them on their level. And for me, it's made a big difference. I find so I'm not a big fan of social in general. I use it. I think it's got a lot of drawbacks that I don't love. And we do monitor our social use with our kids. But I do think that in terms of connecting with your kids, the phone is the way to go, Greg. Absolutely.
Yeah, you have to look. And Tony, it's funny because I think parents say all the time that they don't love the time that their kids spend on their devices. And if you think about it, our parents didn't love the time we spent watching television shows because that wasn't an option for them back when they were kids. And so we often expect from our kids to behave and do things similarly to when we were young, and that's just not the case anymore. Like, well, when I was a kid, we'd go outside and play until the street lights came on. Well, kids don't do that anymore. Like, who are you going to play with? Because all your friends from the neighborhood they're not outside either. So you have to find, and for me, and I do want to get to the cell phone conversation, but I'll tell you, it's like taking phones away from kids. That was always one of our go-to punishments. The problem is you are separating your kids from everything when you take that phone away. Like that's how they do schoolwork. That's how they churn in assignments. That's how they talk to their friends. That's how they keep up to speed with what's happening. And it's their lifeline in a lot of ways. And whether we like it or not, it doesn't really matter. I mean, ultimately, you need to give your kids the tools that they need to live their lives and be successful. And like it or not, today that includes a mobile device. Just does.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Look, as you said, it can be very isolating for them. And look, our parents used to complain about different things when we were kids,
Yep.
right? So we, on some level, we do have to accept that part of it, that it's a different world. It's a mobile world. And it's a virtual world, a digital world. It's all of those things. It's just not, kids aren't congregating at the street corner playing a wiffle ball game like they did when we were kids.
Totally different.
So, yeah. So I'll tell you what, let's take a quick break. I just want to let everyone know that you can find the family section on the podcast page of 985thesportshub.com, as well as the Jassby website, jassby.com, Greg, correct? And that's
jassby.com. So yeah, it's jassby.com, JASSBY as in Sam /podcast. There's a specific section you can also, just for our listeners.
Sorry, I didn't mean to step on you there, Greg. And then you can also check out all the other original podcasts available from Boston's Home for Sports, which is 98.5 The Sports Hub, and also bpodstudios.com, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, all the usual spaces. So we'll take a quick break. We'll come right back on the Family Section podcast with Greg Bottenhorn. Don't go anywhere. Okay, welcome back to the Family Section podcast. One of the things that I had said to Greg right before we took a quick break there was, or concerned rather, the timing of when you get your kids their phones, because this was a question that we actually labored over for a little bit, Greg, in our house. It sounds like the stupidest thing in the world. But when do you get the phone? Like, is it when they're 10? Is it when they're 15? Like, so tell me, what did you do? What did you do in your house?
So it's funny. So again, we've got 4 kids. So for the older ones, we had this, and again, same idea. Like, we struggled over this. We talked about it. Our kids were fighting us from an early age, and we ended up settling on 13 for our older kids. And it was that, when you turn 13, you can get a mobile device. And so that worked. I think for the first 2, we made it through that age. But then after that, it's tough because now it's, again, every year that goes by, kids get younger and younger. And I want to talk about other parents and how that plays in. But, by the time my 4th kid were like 11, I think it was, they started like, Dad, I can't do anything with that unless I have this. And you start to see it, because at first I'm like, yeah, sure you can. Talk to your friends in other ways and all this other stuff. And it's just not possible. Like, I don't know about you, Tony. I don't even have a home phone anymore. So like, I can't even tell my kids, hey, call up your friends. And their friends don't have home phones either. So we started at 13, and I think we ended up getting down to about 11 by the time the last 2 were phone age. How about you guys?
So we do have a home phone, which honestly, because the cell reception in the house is not great, it's pretty good, but we do have times. So we kept the home phone, and there are times where, you can do everything by internet now anyway, so you don't really need it for much else other than, conversation. So, what we did was middle school, which is basically the same area you're talking about. When they went into the 6th grade, that, fall is when they got their phones. And we thought that is the age where, you get in a bigger environment now. You're not in the elementary school anymore. And social life is a bigger part of it. So that's when we did it. And, we actually started, Greg, we were hardcore at the beginning. We went only flip phones because we didn't want any access to social media at that age. We didn't want, you can text on a flip phone at that, obviously I say at that time, my son was responding to text at that time, and text was new to them. So they loved that feature, but no apps, no social media. We were really pretty hardcore about it. And then I think it was 8th grade. I don't remember exactly, but we started to switch over to an iPhone. Like, that was a big deal. And I remember my older one, saying to us, "You can't give him the iPhone before you give it." It was like
Same thing with my kids. They
oh
got
yeah,
so mad about that.
they get so territorial about it.
Yeah.
But to your point about other parents, there is, as a parent, there was peer pressure because, well, so and so got their iPhone when they were in the 5th grade. How come I can't have it? And then you give them the old line, well, if so and so's parents let him jump off a bridge, you're going to do that too. Like,
Yeah.
so they don't. But their argument, it just puts a lot of pressure on you as a parent because then you feel like you're depriving your kids of something.
Oh, it's more than that, Tony, too. It's not only depriving your kids, which, yeah, is a hard part of that. But it's also, again, these kids have to communicate with each other. If their best friend has a phone and they don't, and that's their main social kind of outreach, right? Then how can I tell them that they can't communicate with that kid, right? And again, it becomes really hard. So we really are dependent on when other parents do these things as well. And the hard part is, like, you see this stuff. I see it all the time. There's kids that are like 6, 5 years old that have smartphones these days. And that's crazy to me. But I think we're going to start to see where it just becomes more and more of the thing where the younger kids are, the faster they'll get it. And look, the truth is a lot of parents use it for a babysitting tool for their kids. We see this all the time too, right? Where, mom or dad wants to work or wants to watch a show or do something, and they prop the kid up with a phone or an iPad and say, go to work. So it's a real challenge. And then further than that, Tony, in terms of how other parents do things, it's in monitoring, right? So, I might monitor, and it sounds like you guys did, and we certainly did as well, but monitor what your kids are doing with that phone and who they're talking to and all that other fun stuff. But if other parents don't, it makes it harder and harder for us to parent. So it's tough. I mean, we really are dependent on how other people are parenting these days.
Oh, totally. Look, and I always say I try not to care about what other people are doing with their kids in terms of the guidelines and the boundaries they set. But again, there are certain things that you end up preventing your kids from having access to if you don't allow it. And so, to me, I always say just try to focus on doing what you think is right for your individual child. And, and I say child because at that age, they're really young. And they don't understand the ramifications of their actions on social media or on their phones. And, anything you text to someone's there forever, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, someone takes a screen grab or a screenshot of it and all of a sudden it's there. So, there's a lot of fear that comes with that too. And not all parents are as engaged as, we like to be in our house. And again, I would say my wife is far more connected than I am. But it's, it can be daunting. I don't know if you feel similarly about that, but it is, you don't want to always give them everything they want, but there's like a line there to walk.
Oh, it's incredibly daunting. And look, it's funny because you have boys. I've got 2 boys, 2 girls, and it's a lot different between girls and boys too. I think the girls understand a lot more about the things they put out there and how long that's been in the world. At least my daughters do. But also the way the kids use these devices. Like my boys, yeah, they'll use Discord and some of these chat apps with their friends and stuff. Mostly it's gaming. I mean, that's generally what they're doing. Whereas my daughters, it's all the social stuff and it's making videos. What's that big platform now that TikTok. Yeah, it's making TikTok and watching TikTok. I think my kids could watch TikTok for hours. I hate TikTok. I've actually never been on, but I obviously know a lot about them just from being in the app space. And so I get very concerned about that. I have a lot of conversations with my kids about this, which actually, Tony, is a good thing. I think a lot of these things do help us in terms of communication and opening up conversations we can have with our kids. Have you found that? I know for me, I think a lot of some of the best conversations I've probably ever had with my kids are around these things and teaching them about what's out in the world and all that. What do you think?
Well, so, definitely. I mean, definitely. And I've always been pretty good about going to them and telling them that they can say anything. And so, even stuff that they think that we're going to be mad about from a young age, I tried to really emphasize them to speak up, let us know what's going on, and we'll work with you on it. And I would say, kids are different too, though, Greg, as are people, as you know. Some are more open, some are not. My older one is pretty good. I mean, he's, in terms of sharing things and what's going on, I'm talking about what the social stuff's going on at school, what kids are doing, when he feels uncomfortable, when he doesn't feel uncomfortable. The other guy's a little more private and doesn't really want to share anything because he doesn't want to be scrutinized over it. And so, I mean, the phone and these issues are not, aside, first of all, my parents never had conversations like that with me growing up.
Never, never.
Yeah. And, like, I don't want to get too graphic and give sort of turn it into a sitcom or a TV commercial, but I remember when they were going through, well, so the kids were going through, my older one was going through puberty education at school. And he came down one morning and sat at the kitchen table and said to me, "Yeah, we're going through puberty education." And I said, "Oh," my wife was out of the house. And I'm like, "Well, this is great." So I said, "Well, do you have any questions?" And he said, "Sorta." And he started asking me questions. And I said, "Well, tell me what you know, and I'll tell you whether it's right or it's wrong."
It's Tony, it's so funny that you say that, because there's so many of those conversations that we grew up like hearing about, like the talk with your kids, right? And I feel like that doesn't even happen as much anymore, because they know about this stuff so much earlier because of all the things we've just been discussing, right? They know about this stuff so much earlier than we ever did, that like I feel like a lot of those old conversations that you expect to have as a parent don't even necessarily happen anymore. So it sounds great that you actually had a chance to have that conversation. I don't think I ever did. I think
So
I threw it out to
I never,
kids.
yeah, I never did with the second one because, my guess is the first one told them.
Yeah, told them all about it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So
It's funny. I had another question for you, because I always struggle with this one, right? So I have some friends that read their kids' texts in social interactions with friends and things like that. It's something that I've always struggled with. So how do you guys approach that as parents? Do you go through and read your kids' texts and see what they're doing with their friends on social platforms and things like that?
So it's a great question, Greg. And I would say that not often, not often. So, and they're old enough now where they have a clue. My older one in particular, again, he's 17. So we tried to give them some level of privacy. I mean, I think, what we made clear to them what the boundaries are, and you never know what your kids are going to do. But I would say also read, we try to read our kids and understand what they may or may not be getting into. And you may or may not know. I mean, you might have the totally wrong read, but generally speaking, I would say that ours are rule followers. So they try to abide by what the parameters are, and that doesn't mean they don't venture outside them. But I would say that when they do venture outside, they're not things that are, potentially damaging. They're just sneaky things that kids do to get a little more freedom, and that is it. So we don't read their texts a lot. We don't. Every once in a while, I might, if it's sitting there, I might peek over, but I do think it's important that they have some space. Like, I don't want to be on them every second. I don't think that's healthy for them either. It's just my two cents.
I totally agree. And you also want them to be themselves, right? If they know that you're going to be reading them, they're not going to be themselves. And I think, look, a lot of that comes down to how you parent them and the foundation that they have. And if you give them the right values, and again, I get that that's easier said than done, right? But at some point, you have to trust them to then take what you've taught them and what they've learned and go out into the real world with it. So we've tried it a few times. It's probably some of the bigger fights I've ever had with my kids came down to it. And I think I got to the point where I just decided it wasn't worth it. And honestly, the stuff I was reading, like, other than some salty language, perhaps, there really wasn't a whole lot in there that was concerning. They're not talking about dangerous stuff or things like that. And to your point, right, some of that comes down to reading your kids. I think generally, if your kid's one of those kids that maybe you need to keep a closer eye on or not. Like you, I'm pretty fortunate in that my kids are generally well behaved and rule followers and all that. So, but it's always, I have friends that's just their deal with their kids. And if you're gonna have a phone, I'm gonna read all your stuff, and it's gonna happen every Sunday night. And they actually do sit down and go through it line by line. And I don't know. That's not me, I don't think.
No, it's not me either. Because I think that, you need to let your hair down a little bit, right?
Yep.
And we all do it. When you step into your home, that's supposed to be a place where you can kind of unwind, let it go a little bit, relax. And if you are on your kids constantly, they don't get to do that. Even when they're young, you say, well, what do they need to relax from? Well, kids have stressors. I mean, and they have stresses. And, they need to sometimes just be able to chill and kick back and, So the language on the text doesn't bother me if it's typically the type of, language that we would use, and like, oh yeah, I'm going to say to Skaz, our producer, James Scarabazino, I don't know what's allowed for language here or isn't. But like, if you say to someone, I got a lot of shit going on at work today, and Skaz, if we have to beep that out, beep it out. Like that doesn't bother me. That's fine. Yeah. What's that?
I said, I think you can say shit on a podcast. I think that's
I just don't know what people are necessarily expecting out of this one in terms of your side and my side.
It's a family show, right, Tony?
Yeah, well, right, exactly.
So good.
So like stuff like that to me is just sort of typical conversation and no big deal. It's the photos that I worry about more than anything.
My gosh, totally. And that's again, as a father with 2 daughters, like that's always been one of my biggest fears too. And so it's parenting your kids in terms of respecting themselves and respecting their bodies, and yet you hope it sticks. I mean, that's about the best you can do there.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So look, in any case, one of the goals of this podcast is we don't want to inundate you with these super long podcasts that go on for an hour and a half. And because I don't think people have the time to listen to those. The idea is to give them to you in shorter segments, which I think we've done. Yeah. Which we've done here. And so we will be posting an episode every couple of weeks or so. Greg, is that the goal?
Sounds about right to me.
Yeah. Somewhere in that area. And we'll try to hit on different things. And as Greg said, we will have guests as well. We'll have a guest in the next one for you and try to just talk about some of the things that parents talk about, that guys talk about, women as well. And we don't mean to exclude the moms out there and the, wives or girlfriends or partners or whatever. But obviously, it's an opportunity. It's not something that guys necessarily talk a lot about. And we thought it would be a good opportunity to do that here. So thanks to everyone for listening. Again, his name is Greg Bottenhorn. He's the Chief Marketing Officer of Jassby. And once again, a reminder that you can find the Family Section podcast on the podcast page of 985thesportshub.com. Also, the 985 The Sports Hub app. You can also find it at jassby.com, which is jassby.com/podcast or podcasts, Greg, plural?
Podcast.
Okay, jassby.com/podcast. And be sure to check out bpodstudios.com, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, all the usual places. We'll catch you next time on the Family Section podcast.